Okay, so with that, I think we can show the slides, Linda.
I think that you should be seeing my slides.
Okay, thank you. And our hosts today is Linda Jansen, who's our program director. And next slide.
This is going to be the presentation um, from Lynn. So I can move to make introductions if you'd like.
Introductions of our speakers. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here on this blustery day, at least in California. I want to introduce you to the three speakers we're going to have on our presentation today, and then give you a little bit of preview of the format we're going to use, which is slightly different than we've used in other meetings you may have participated in. So let me start with introductions. Our first speaker is going to be Lynn Whitley. She's a member of the League of Women Voters of Washington State and her local league. The Washington League was she was on the original local study news team in 2022. In early 2023, she was appointed to the Whitley League Board, and later that year, she represented her local league at the Washington League Convention, at the National Convention in 2024. I was there, but I didn't get a chance to meet you, Lynn. It was that convention where the local news studies was adopted as a national position, and Lynn will talk to us a little bit about what that position is, what the league's position. Our next speaker is Lisa Hayamoto with the American Journalism Project. Lisa is dedicated to building a durable local news infrastructure through sustainable organizational growth, systems linking, and community engagement. She's Vice President of Portfolio Learning at the American Journalism Project, where she surfaces data insights across the grantee experiences and creates learning that move news organizations forward. She was previously a senior leader at Lion Publishers, a journalism educator at the University of Oregon, and a reporter at the Sacramento Bee and the Seattle Times. She lives in Portland, Oregon, where she and her husband publish a community newspaper while raising two daughters, a dog and a cat. Good luck with the dog and a cat. That's all I can say. Jerry Lee is founder and publisher of the San Mateo Daily Journal. Many of you listening will be familiar with that media source. It is the only independent daily newspaper serving the peninsula. The Daily Journal's sole agenda is to provide local accountability, community storytelling, and a principled forum for ideas in an increasingly polarized world. Those are our speakers. Well, once I finished up here, we're going to hear from Lynn, and we've chosen a format that we hope will provide a good context for discussion, as well as providing some new insights into how local media actually happens. We'll leave time at the end of the presentation to ask the speakers questions you've put into the chat. Lynn will open the meeting. She's going to share the National League of Women Voters position supporting local media. We'll move to Lisa, who'll provide overview information about the American Journalism Project and what we have come to know about the impact of local media on good government. And when she's finished her presentation, she's going to bring Jerry into the conversation with a few questions about his boots on the ground experience of putting out a local paper 6 days a week, as well as exploring his experience with the connection between media and community. So with that, I will, for those of you who've joined and are not speakers, you may want to put yourself on mute, and I will move to Lynn's presentation.
Thank you, Linda. Let me just take a few minutes to summarize the League's national position, offer a brief background on how more than 1 million League members and supporters reach concurrence on this issue, and review a few next steps. Next slide, please. The League's position statement, developed from findings from the decline of local news and its impact on democracy, was adopted by the League of Women Voters of the United States on June 29, 2024 in Washington, D.C. And it reads as follows. The League of Women Voters of the United States believes that it is the responsibility of the government to provide support for conditions under which credible local journalism can survive and thrive. The defines local news as accurate, in-depth coverage of local government entities, including, but not limited to, city councils, county boards of commissioners, health departments, schools, and school boards. The League supports credible and ethical local journalism in whatever format it is published as essential to our democracy. The League supports efforts to ensure everyone has access to information necessary for casting an informed ballot, and that credible local news sources are integral to this purpose. The League believes that support for the viability of local news may take a variety of forms. Control of the content must remain exclusively with the news organizations. The League also believes media literacy and news education, including support for journalism students, are essential. These opportunities should be expanded in schools and throughout communities. The League also believes that everyone should have access to comprehensive, credible local news, and that barriers to access should be removed. These barriers include, but are not limited to, geography, economic status, and education. A little background first. In 2021, 9 League members who live in different regions of Washington state launched the Responsible Journalism Affinity Group to study the local news environment in our state. About half of the study members are retired professional journalists. We conducted a year-long study, and our charge was to evaluate the conditions of news outlets in Washington. Were they disappearing at the same rate as other states? And if so, were Washington residents experiencing the same known impacts of lower political participation, less government oversight, higher government cost, reduced community engagement, and a lack of communication about public health as documented in national studies like those conducted by Professor Penelope Muse Abernathy? Her research represents some of the most comprehensive reporting on the crisis at the time of our study and served as a touchstone for it. We used standard reporting techniques and gathered information from more than 50 scholars, journalists, elected officials, and government and civic leaders, including public health professionals. We also reviewed more than 500 documents from scholarly studies to articles in the popular press. Other efforts included tracking circulation and staffing trends within the state, closure of newspapers, and the occasional rise of a new outlet. Newspapers with general population readership, as well as those that served specific ethnic communities, were also reviewed. We examined potential measures to protect local news, such as legislation, nonprofit ownership, community partnerships, and philanthropy. Our task was not to present solutions. Rather, it was to provide information to make readers aware of the significance of the issue, with a goal of reaching consensus on a League policy. In 2022, our news group published The Decline of Local News and Its Impact on Democracy. Meetings were held around the state to gain consensus on the position from our state's 19 local leagues and their 2,000 members. The state board approved the study in September of that year. With state consensus in hand, we applied to the League of Women Voters of the U.S. to consider national consensus. We reached out and spoke with numerous leagues across the country, sharing our position and asking for their support. In 2024, we met many of those members at the National Convention in Washington, D.C. Together, in true League fashion, we discussed and answered questions. That process resulted in an 859 to 63 vote from all registered League members at the National Convention to adopt our local news position. Today, the National Office is tracking the League's engagement and work around this issue for the next biennium. Now that the National League has concurred with this position, leagues across the country can advocate at the local and state level. This means you can ask elected officials to introduce legislation and you can work with them to draft that legislation. It also means that you can educate voters to be media literate and work to support journalism students in schools and in your communities. Here are just a few highlights of what our league is doing to put the national position in practice. Advocacy. At the request of the Attorney General, we advocated for business and occupational tax exemption for news publishers. That measure was enacted into law in 2024. This legislative session, we formed a coalition of news outlets. These included small to large, print and digital, for-profit, nonprofit, as well as labor groups and broadcast media to help draft, support, and advocate for a bill to create and fund the Washington Local News Sustainability Program. This bill is currently working its way through the legislative process, and it has broad support because of its revenue generating profile. Our league is also a member of the Rebuild Local News National Coalition. This nonprofit is eager to work with others pursuing efforts to rebuild local news. And on the education front, to help league members learn skills to discern what is true and to increase their understanding of the role local news plays in a healthy democracy, our league developed a media literacy and news education project. It includes a video introduction to media and news literacy and 4 interactive educational workshops. The workshops teach skills to help discern what is true at a time when it's becoming harder to know the real facts. Later this year, we will provide training to league members so that they can offer the workshops in their different communities. We also provide blurbs for the Lieutenant Governor's monthly newsletter, and we've partnered with the University of Washington's Center for Informed Public to incorporate the latest in academic learnings on media literacy in our workshops. That's a brief background on the national position on local news. So now, Linda, I'll turn it back to you.
My gosh, I had no idea. I think it's exciting to think what leagues around the country can do with that as a template for building a media framework in their legislative bodies. That's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. Speaking of sharing, I'm going to stop sharing. And Lisa, I will hand the screen over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Get this popped up. We are trying to do some coalition building here in Oregon, where I'm based, around strengthening local news. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, clearly we need to get the League of Women Voters involved based on what y'all have been doing in Washington. That is incredible work. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. I'm super excited to talk about the state of local news. I thought that I would kind of give sort of a high-level national picture of what's going on here, and then I'm really excited to dig in with Jerry to learn about what's going on the streets of San Mateo County and all of the great work that his publication is doing there. So I thought I would start with a little bit of a sort of a how we got here moment. Some of this will not be a surprise to some of you, but I think it might be some nice context setting for our discussion today. So for much of the 20th century, local news was very strong. This is often referred to as the Golden Age. The primary outlets that were delivering original content in local news were, of course, newspapers. And they largely had a market monopoly because we were working within a context of information scarcity, right? Like there wasn't that much there weren't that many places you could go to for information. And so the news organizations were it, right? You tuned into the local news on TV, you read your local newspaper, your alt weekly, your public radio station. And that combined with a relatively overall high level of trust in institutions meant that these were good years financially for local news organizations. I do want to say that I do put golden age in quotes here because even though newspapers were very robust, local news systems were very robust, they weren't serving everybody equally, right? They tended to serve some audiences more than others. And so I do think it's important to state that it wasn't a golden age for all information consumers, but for many. Um, and then we get to the early 2000s, where local news and journalism in general really experienced a huge disruption in its business model. Of course, the way that most local news organizations were funded was through advertising, both like the ads from businesses, but also classified advertisement. And news was really subsidized by those. And of course, those were significantly like shattered basically by the rise of the internet, right? Like classified ads, what you could go to Craigslist for that. And then, of course, Google and increasingly more of the platforms became so adept at targeting folks for online advertising that there's not kind of a market left over after all of that. So the underpinnings of the finances of what was keeping local news organizations robust basically kind of crumbled beneath, which was really resulted in kind of a general overall market failure for how you fund local news. Now, this is not universal. Jerry and I both run news organizations that are proving this to be an exception here, but generally speaking, the business model collapsed, and we started to see decreasing trust in institutions and the media. Right, like news and journalism is kind of an institution, even though our mission is to hold other institutions accountable. That brings us to the 2010s. This was a real age of information democratization. This is the true rise of social media. And now we're operating in a context of information abundance, right? There's so much information out there. Anyone can share news and information. And just the way that you engage in it, it completely changed. And this is a really beautiful thing in a lot of ways, right? We're hearing voices all over. You could see that there's a lot of impact of this sort of like on the street perspective, not just in the US, but globally. But it also coincided with bad actors who are trying to share information for nefarious gains, right? So this is the rise of misinformation, disinformation, information that is intended to confuse or sort of like has a secret agenda, and is using all of the tools available for not societal benefit. This is also combined with a really just a consolidation of existing media organizations. You start to see fewer independently owned newspaper organizations, local news publications. You start to see more consolidation. And some of the consolidation is more like a venture capitalist style, where large chains buy up struggling news organizations and then they kind of like strip them for parts basically, in an effort to make a profit. So you're starting to see this accelerate, which means less local news for communities. That brings us to the early 2020s. The loss is accelerating, but there's also some really exciting resurgence happening. So this is the rise of algorithmic information, right? Like folks getting the information they want tailored to their needs, and then they just don't see other pieces of information. The consolidation across news organizations is very aggressive at this point. And there are just more and more kind of big conglomerates and fewer independent sources of news. You've seen a lot of closures of news organizations, but you're also seeing a real resurgence in independent news. So 2020 was an absolutely astonishing year for new news organizations forming, new local news organizations. And there are two reasons for that. One is the COVID pandemic really underscored for people the importance of local in your backyard news, because what was happening in your immediate community like was the most important thing. And what was happening elsewhere, important too, but like you needed to know. So there were a lot of news organizations that were formed in that time. And then also the racial reckoning and the George Floyd murder, and all of the sort of upheaval and the social uprising that was happening during that time also inspired a lot of folks to form news organizations because they were like, you know what, my community has not been well served and they deserve to be well served with local news. So I'm going to start a news organization to serve them. So a complicated time, those early 2020s, which brings us to today, right? Everything is accelerating. The rise of AI is really upending sort of business models and the way that people find information. And so there's a lot of shifting there. We're not just in a context of information abundance, but information overload, where people are actually trying to keep out information because so much of it is coming. And so news organizations are really thinking about how to reach people in that environment. And the stakes are higher, which I'll get to in a moment, because local news plays a really powerful role in sort of like the institutions and our democratic institutions. And then independent news continues to really accelerate as folks are understanding the importance of that. More news organizations are forming. Existing independent news organizations are getting stronger. So it's still a very complicated and uneven time, but there's a lot of really cool things happening. But first, I'm going to depress you a little bit because I really feel like it's important to talk about the impact of the loss of local news. So I heard Lynn talking about some of the research into what we call news deserts, which are counties across the US that don't have any local source of news at all. So you can see in this map, those are the yellow counties. So there's just absolutely no local news there at all. The light purple are the ones where there's one maybe outlet, and then the purple counties are the ones that have multiple. And you can see here San Mateo County is one of those. So you can look at the purple here and you can be like, that's awesome. Or you could look at the light purple and the yellow and be like, ooh, we've got some work to do, which is kind of where I land. So where we're at now is about 2.5 newspapers close each week. Again, newspapers are the primary source of original reporting on local communities. So that's a real loss. 55 million Americans just straight up don't have access to local news at all. There's a 43% increase in those mergers and acquisitions that I was talking about. Sometimes a merger and acquisition is good and it actually enables more news for local communities, but often it results in less. And then overall, oh, that can't be right. I think that might be 2005. There's been a significant decrease in newspaper employment. Again, newspapers, the primary providers of original reporting. And when there are fewer reporters on the ground, there's less local news. And so sometimes this results in what we call ghost newspapers, where it's a newspaper, it's been there, maybe, maybe it's changed ownership or whatever. But the amount of local news it's producing is almost nothing, or sometimes actually nothing. So it feels like there's something there. On paper, there's something there, but in practice, there isn't. And of course, the consequences of a lack of loss of local news on our communities are really, really dire. The body of research is really showing this connection directly. So if there is a decline in original reporting, original local news, of course that results in a less informed public. Now, I think it's interesting to draw a distinction between informed and sort of getting information, right? We're all inundated with information, but how much of it is actually informing us? And so those who get not good quality information on their local communities, it leads directly to declines in civic engagement. So fewer people vote in areas where there are no or little local news. And civic engagement goes down. And that's a pretty direct result. Government waste increases. Of course, journalism holds itself accountable to holding public institutions accountable. So when there's no one kind of keeping an eye on things, waste increases. And here's one that I think is really interesting. Polarization increases in communities where there is not a strong local news presence because folks are getting national information. And as you all know, our national information ecosystem is so polarized, so us and them. So you get information here for these people and here for these people. And so local news is a place to bring folks together and be like, except for that, we all live here, right? So like, let's have a shared reality because we have to. And in the absence of that, people just opt into that national narrative. There's research that shows that even running editorial pieces, so opinion pieces in local news organizations about national politics increases polarization. So it's a really strong effect. And I think, we're all kind of thinking about what that means today. And yet there is true growth and innovation. And you've got here Jerry on the call, right, who's going to talk about the incredible work that he's doing in his community. So this is another map of all of the digital news outlets across the US. So in addition to strong like print newspapers that are doing great work, there's also these additional, usually digital only news organizations. Sometimes they are, it's just online. Sometimes it's via a newsletter. Sometimes it's via text message, right? So there's all sorts of different ways that these organizations are reaching folks. And there's 1,300 digital news orgs in the United States by count of this source Project Oasis, which I used to be a little bit involved in. But they're doing a strong count, not just in the US, but across the world. 217 new orgs were launched just from 2020 to 2024. So I mentioned that was a big growth period as local news became more people understood the benefit of it. 1 in 7 of these orgs were started specifically to address the news desert. So this is the Project Oasis, right? You get it, news desert, oasis. So this is both clever and true because these are true information oases. And here's a really interesting thing. 59% of these organizations are led by women. Across the board, these independent news organizations are there's a much higher likelihood that they are led by a woman or a person of color or someone who is sort of younger. So there's true innovation happening here and sort of a change from the way that it was done before and a change of outlook that is often reflected in the way that they're serving their communities. So I work at the American Journalism Project, and we're playing a big role in this. So what we do is we provide transformative funding for nonprofit news organizations, and then we help them meet very, very ambitious growth goals to better serve their communities and to serve more folks. So we do a couple of things. We provide large grants to folks to help them grow. And then we also go into areas where there isn't as strong a local news presence as there maybe could or should be. And we do a whole bunch of research and coalition building to work with folks who are stakeholders, funders, existing news organizations, other nonprofits, saying, okay, what does this area need? And then we help launch whatever everybody decides is needed. So we're really making big bets and big plays. You can see on the map here, the little lights are news organizations that we support across the country. And so, we're really proud of the work that we do. We call ourselves a venture philanthropy organization because we're really helping folks take the grants that we make and turn it into like true and lasting growth. So we currently support 54 nonprofit news organizations across the United States. We just launched 9 new newsrooms in 2024. So real boots on the ground there. Our organizations overall are increasing their revenue year over year. We really support on the business side of things. So like we look to these sorts of metrics to be like, but how is it going? a strong business supports strong journalism, which supports strong communities. And we believe news is a public good. So 23% median revenue growth, and then 717 journalists in the field at the organizations we work with. And that's how one of the ways we measure success. Are there more journalists being hired based off of the work that we're doing on the business side of things? Lynn touched on this a bit, and I was excited to hear about all of the progress that's happening there. But really, overall, there's a lot of progress happening in terms of local news strengthening. So the goal is, of course, impactful journalism, right? Really important, strong journalism that serves people, helps them make sense of things, helps them be engaged in their world and in their life and in their civic life. And so there's some exciting things happening. One, public awareness of the local news, of the importance of local news, is growing. There's a lot of research that shows that most people don't know that like local news needs to be supported and is having, needs stakeholders and is not just a thing that happens magically. So that public awareness is a huge piece of it. We're also seeing philanthropy getting involved in local news in the way that they would any other important mission-based cause. Because again, no matter what you're doing, having strong information around it is incredibly important. So there's been a huge rise in nonprofit news organizations, and sort of like national and local philanthropic interest in news. So that's been a real burgeoning area. There has been a lot of movement on the public policy front in terms of supporting local news. So there have been a handful of public policy things happening in states across the US, Washington included. Again, Lynn, thanks for teeing that up. But understanding that if local news is a public good, then there does need to be some public policy support for it in a way that, still enables local news organizations to hold public institutions accountable. And then finally, news organizations are really thinking about what it looks like to be resilient and to be sustainable, to really have a strong business function that is shoring up the journalistic function that is sort of like that mission. So you're seeing more diverse revenue streams for organizations. You're seeing interesting kind of like ownership and tax structure models that are helping folks get build the coalitions they need to build, and really relying on communities to support local news because that's the true beneficiary. So there's a lot of really exciting things happening, and there's still loss. I don't want to put on blinders to that. But if you're only looking at what we're losing, you're not able to see what we're gaining, and what we're gaining is something truly significant. So I'll just quickly give you a couple of examples of journalism that makes a difference. These are some of the organizations that my organization works with, doing true heroes work. So there's an organization in New York called The City. You may have seen this in the news a couple of months ago. The mayor of New York straight up tried to bribe a reporter by putting money in a bag of chips and handing it to her. And that was a news organization that we work with, and of course, reporting on that undoubtedly played a role in the sort of the way that administration petered out. We work with an organization in Chicago called Block Club. And as you know, Chicago was the site of a lot of immigration raids and a lot of protest action. And the way that protesters and news reporters were being treated, they were being pepper sprayed, tear gassed, just trying to do their jobs. And so this organization filed a legal suit to say that they can't do that. And that was actually kind of a brave moment because that then makes them a target, right? And they won that. So they're standing up for kind of like the rights of local news practitioners to do their job for their communities. a really wonderful organization in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, the Sahan Journal. Their whole mission is to cover the immigrant community in St. Paul and Minneapolis. And so when the federal immigration action got extremely intense there, that's their whole job. They were already there. They already have built trust with this community. They're already doing incredible work. So when the spotlight fades from Minneapolis, they're still going to be there just doing that incredible boots on the ground work to serve this population that has not been very well served. Just to think again about what it looks like when you've got really strong local news, when you're in the national spotlights. We work with an organization called El Paso Matters. Of course, we all heard that the El Paso airport was closed down and then open, and there's sort of a battle between, the FAA and sort of border entities that resulted in that closure. And that was a national story, right? But like, what does it mean for El Pasoans? I don't know. People who live and work and are in El Paso, they don't have an airport for a while, right? So this organization is already on the ground talking about what does that mean for you? And then, of course, this organization also in Chicago called City Bureau won the Pulitzer Prize in 2024. And I think it's really a very cool thing to note that the last 3 Pulitzer Prizes for local news have been awarded to these independent startup organizations, which really shows, I think, the high caliber of journalism that independent organizations are doing, and that they're really a center of gravity for strong local news coverage. So I've yammered on, but I'd love to turn it to Jerry, because I know you're doing incredible work in San Mateo County. Maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about some of the strong journalism that you've been doing lately and how it's serving your community.
Sure, thank you. That was an amazing presentation, by the way. You're so articulate, and the slides were excellent.
Thank you.
Gosh, I think, strangely enough, we started in 2000 when the industry started to disintegrate. And I think that was actually a good thing because we've never had a golden age. And I think that's kind of made us tougher. And so without having had any sort of monopoly or fringe benefit thereof, we've always had to just kind of work super hard and super smart and efficiently to do what we do here in this community. So I just thought of that today, by the way, while you were doom and glooming me and making me depressed. But I think that as too was something that contributed to our ability to not only survive but thrive now. So yeah, that's great insight for me. Anyways, gosh, our mission is pretty simple. It's just to try to be an information resource for the local community. My personal job is to just manage the P&L, make sure the business side is humming along and we can pay our bills, and also let the talent do their job as journalists. So like in a movie production, say, my journalist team, the editor, John Mays, and his reporters, they're the George Clooney's and Julia Roberts. And I'm more the, the best boy or whatever in the background that you don't really hear about. I try to stay out of the public eye when possible, even though I probably should. But I let John do that. I want him to be the face of the community. So this was actually John's job, but he was taking a trip, so I stepped in. And John would have done far better, but I'll do my best here. The day-to-day for us and what we do to provide news, essentially in the morning, the business team comes in and we do the advertising and marketing. We do the community outreach and relationship building with the business community and the nonprofits, and create the news hole, as it were, for the journalists to fill with content. Obviously, creating local content is not cheap, so it's important to have the financial remuneration to be able to provide that. And with the news hole, then the team comes in later in the morning and works on their various assignments, stories, and beats. And my reporters do more than most people. They generally cover 5 cities plus 2 to 4 topics. So one reporter will do San Mateo, Belmont, San Carlos, Redwood City, and maybe development as well. It's a big task, and kudos to them. And it's kind of how we've always done. Even in the early days, we had reporters do multiple things and still do a good job. So they will come in, write their stories, post them with the editor for review, and then the editor comes in and lays out the print edition, uploads all the content to our website, and then sent off to the printer, which is located in San Francisco. And then between 2 and 3 a.m., the truck comes and drops off the bundles, and then a team of 10 drivers comes here, picks up their allotment, and spreads it out throughout the community. And then at 8 a.m., repeat, rinse, lather, repeat, and we do it again. And yes, this is a 6-day-a-week endeavor. We do it with less than 20 full-time employees, and we don't know how we do it. It's like, when you're mortally wounded, but you don't know you're mortally wounded until you pull out the knife, and then you die. We haven't pulled out the knife, so we don't know how we do it, but it happens, and we're grateful to whatever higher power or what allows us to be. So that's kind of how the model is working. And we're not innovative. It's kind of old school. Try to be traditional journalism. We're trying to be the opposite of what's happened to information in today's world. As you mentioned, it went from the tech, like the iPhone really changed things, right? It allowed everybody to consume their news right out of their pocket at any given time on demand. And then obviously social media was the next big revolution. And then now it's going to be AI, right? That's going to be the next level of chaos coming down journalism's way. We haven't really changed our model other than, adjustments. Like, we put up a website. We do social media here and there, automated. But we try not to kind of change the foundation, which is to produce a daily paper, get it out there, let people read it, let people write letters to the editor, stuff that may be critical of us or that we disagree with personally, politically, whatever. We give them a platform for people we disagree with, as well as those who we agree with. And I think people like that. We try to treat our audience intelligently. We assume that they have some modicum of media literacy and try not to insult them or patronize them. And we don't push any kind of political agenda. No, we're not left, we're not right. And so far, that's worked.
Great. I love how you were talking about the logistics of putting out a paper 6 days a week. I believe we used to call it the Daily Miracle because, wow, a lot goes into that.
Sure does.
I'm so interested though. So you founded this organization in 2000, which is an unusual time, right? Because the writing wasn't on the wall yet. And we hadn't experienced such loss that we needed to resurge. So I love that you basically started lean, right? You couldn't lean on 100 years of this or that. But tell me about the founding. What inspired you all to start this publication, and how did you get it off the ground?
Sure. The genesis of this newspaper was not my idea personally. There were a couple of Stanford MBAs that had started a paper in Berkeley in the year before, and it was kind of, I guess they called it a micro daily, free and just to a very small communities, as opposed to the media landscape or the print media landscape at the time, which was big municipal giant cities like Seattle or San Francisco or LA. Those were still strong, like you mentioned. So this was supposed to be a little more hyper-local and then open 100 of these, 200 of these throughout the United States. and then we were going to flip it to Knight Ridder or some other large conglomerate and retire at 35 or something. That, of course, did not occur, did not happen. And so the funding that we had from venture capital went away once they saw the writing on the wall. And then I was given the opportunity to continue running our paper in San Mateo. But it was kind of running as a zombie, which meaning not like these other, like these brand new buyout newspapers that aren't generating content, but there was no ownership or leadership other than me. So the VC people had all been fired or terminated. And so there was this outstanding project on the books they didn't care about. So I just kind of offered them a really, 20 cents on the dollar to just give me the rest of the shares. And they did. And I was really lucky. I mean, I was right place, right time. Well, some would say unlucky because it's a newspaper after all, but I feel that I was the luckiest guy in the world. I took a second loan on my house and got some friends and family to invest. And then I think that was in 05 or 06. That's when I was able to take it over. But by and large, I was able to run it since the beginning, even when it was under venture capital ownership.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. And since then, honestly, it's just the same thing. I mean, this is my second job ever. Prior to this, I was working for a newspaper in Tacoma called the News Tribune. I learned kind of the trade. And I wasn't in the journalism side. That was all business side. But in college, I was just really into the writing, the editing. I wanted to be a journalist back then. But then I went to the dark side and went to the business side, and here I am. And what's great is my team of John, his leadership, again, he's the face of the paper. His knowledge of our county and our peninsula is unparalleled. He is Mr. San Mateo. He could be the unofficial historian of the peninsula. And he's just a true treasure for me, for this company, and as well as you all in this community. Yeah.
I love that. Another thing they say about local news is we write the first draft of history.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what sort of journalism does the San Mateo Daily Journal do? What are you proud of there? How is your journalism serving the community?
I think the most important thing is just being a kind of information resource. We try to cover most of the city council meetings, obviously the county meetings, school boards. I think it's like every study has shown a well-informed community is vital to democracy, and just to the concept of community. Without it, I know people are busy. They're kids and they have jobs and they have whatever. It's hard to keep track of things, but it's important. And I think people aren't aware of how important it is until something affects them directly. Like if they find out that their middle school is going to get closed, possibly through a board meeting, or a Walmart is coming next door, and all of a sudden news is important to them. So it'd be nice if people would understand that news is important to you, even if it doesn't impact you yourself directly, financially, societally, or whatever. So I like the kind of the day-to-day coverage. I think our crime and safety coverage is vital. It saves lives, literally. Like lately, there's been a spate of, unfortunately, cars versus pedestrians happening. And honestly, we really want to try to help somehow, some way, because it's sad. I mean, there's more cars, faster cars, more distractions by the phone among the drivers, and poor pedestrians getting run down. We want to somehow figure out a way to help our local cities and governments address this. So crime and safety. And then something that I think I really love about this paper is we do prep sports still. Let me tell you, as a businessman, that does not make any money. I mean, it's a very niche audience. It's just, the parents and grandparents of the athletes, right? And they move on after 4 years. But I think it's very important, not only to the parents, but also the kids themselves to have their accolades presented. And that sports team, they treat them like as if they were covering the Giants or the 49ers or the Warriors. It's pretty incredible. So those three things, and then we try to, and again, as I mentioned, everybody covers multiple beats, so we don't have like a entertainment beat, lifestyle, restaurants. So while they're covering 4 cities and 3 other quote unquote important topics like education or development, occasionally we'll do a restaurant profile or something about a female focused tattoo clinic. I think that was an article a couple of years ago that one of our reporters did. So we try to mix in a little bit of fun and cool things like that. I think that's important because it's not just all quote unquote the important stuff that we should cover. We want to have a little bit of fun and life oriented things in the paper.
Right. I think about this all the time. So I have some friends who are artists, and I went and hung out with them at their like artist colony.
Yeah.
And they told me that all like there's like, there's people who are buyers of art, supporters of art, right? And they said that all the supporters of art just want to talk about the art, and all the artists just want to talk about like the funding, right?
Interesting.
And so I am obsessed with sort of the business side of news organizations because that is, of course, what enables the local news. So how is the Daily Journal? How is it make revenue? Has that changed over the years? What does that kind of look like when you pop under the hood a little bit?
Sure. When we first started, it was the majority, if not all, of the revenue came from just traditional print ads. And then over time, that slowly started to dwindle. We had the tech in 9/11. We had the tech, then the first tech bubble explosion and bubble pop. And then we had the mortgage meltdown in 2008. At each point, what we thought was just a temporary decline didn't really stay temporary, so the print revenue continued to drop. So we knew even as early as 2008 that we needed to find additional revenue sources besides traditional print revenue. Some of that is made up for through web digital advertising, although as everybody in this industry knows, Google and Facebook basically just vacuum up 95% of that revenue, leaving 5% for all other media, not just newspapers, right? So digital it's a pennies. But we decided in like 2016, we decided to start charging for our content online. So our paper, it's a kind of a unique model because we're free in print, but charged online. It's kind of different. Most are the other way or both. So I don't know of any other newspaper doing that. So our thesis here is that if you want the convenience of being able to read our paper digitally on your computer at work, then we ask for a fee. You can't afford it, then we at least have print copies throughout San Mateo County available for free. We deliver to about 3,000 locations like City Hall, hospitals, government buildings, restaurants, coffee shops, retirement homes. So the paper's out there in print for people to grab for free if they need to. So the subscriptions online have been a source of revenue for us, and it continues to grow. It really did. We dropped the paywall during COVID, obviously, just as a public health and safety need for the community. But once we put the back up after COVID was kind of under control, a lot of people continued to support us with funds. So that was very useful. And then in 2010, we started doing community events, such as senior events and family fairs, and about 6 to 8 a year. And what that does is grab additional revenue. So we're not selling ads anymore. We're doing sponsorships and spots at these events. So we'll go to local businesses who want to talk to seniors, for like retirement homes, insurance agents, financial planners, and say, hey, you can buy a table for a couple $1,000. We'll bring you a couple hundred leads or prospects to our event. Our most recent one was in January in Millbrae. had about 400 people come. It was an awesome event. Everybody loved it, and we have fun doing it. And it's, again, it helps replace some of the lost print revenue. So yeah, and then we want to come up with other sources of revenue whenever possible. But I think we still have a huge growth opportunity in the paid subscriptions space. I think it's $100 a year, and I think it's well worth the investment for people who want to find out what's going on in their community and be entertained.
Yeah. That's great to hear that you've diversified in so many areas. I'm thinking about, so Linda mentioned in my bio, I also I just 8 months ago bought my community newspaper here in Portland, which my husband and I run on the side,
On the
which
side,
is
nice.
intense. And we also have a print product. It is primarily a print product. And so I think it's so interesting to hear how you're thinking about the print versus the online. And I think that it's like each community is different, right? And that's the beauty of local news is we're not trying to do a one size fits all thing. We are of the community, right? Like we are stakeholders too in the future. And so the way that local news organizations serve their audiences is based on the audience, right? And what they need. So are there any like things about San Mateo County news consumers that are worth saying, yes, people have said they want this, so we do that, or people like their information this way, so we do that, right? Any kind of like ways that you think about the specifics of your readers?
Well, that's a great question. We often try to make sure that we are doing what people want. But of course, in some ways, our job is not to do that 100% because it's like a doctor. You wouldn't go to a doctor right off the bat and say, Doc, I need a prescription for this, and I need this procedure done. When can I get it? No, the doctor would generally interview you and ask you what you want and what you need, and then provide the diagnosis and solution. So I think in some ways, John is educated in this field to say this is what information is important to the community, and this is what our job is to provide. That said, we need to balance it with the evolving tastes and needs of the community. And yeah, we're always open to the feedback and advice that people give us. Some of the things that I think are unique to the peninsula is it's interesting. This is we have there's like 15 little mini kingdoms of governance here. Like the cities are small, so it's like in San Francisco, they're in like supervisory districts, I think like 15 or something. Here it's cities. So each city is unique. So like Foster City is way different than Millbrae, is way different than South San Francisco. So it's hard to like have one kind of cookie cutter way to serve everybody. But some of the basic things that I think we know that people like political coverage, like 90% of our readers in a recent poll, they're voters. We have registered to vote, so 90%. So that's a pretty high registration percentage, I think, for any kind of group of people. So political coverage is important, and then we're like in Silicon Valley, so everybody's tech savvy, right? So we have to have. I mean, our tech isn't the greatest. Like our website isn't the most modern, cool, advanced, anything like that. But we have to be there. We have to have a presence, and it's got to be solid and not break all the time. So that's, I think, important, is to address people's technical savvy here. And then folks are pretty educated and smart in the area we live in. I think most on the West Coast, it's like that. But so we're, like I said earlier in this presentation, well, we can't patronize people or dumb things down. I think we have to understand that people are pretty smart out there, our audience. So we don't want to insult our people's intelligences. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I love this county. I live here since 1999, 2000. It's run very well, and we're not your traditional muckraking type of newspaper. We're not trying to gotcha people. people are pretty cool once we come to an understanding of how we're not your spokespeople government. We're not Pravda. We're not like state press. So you have to treat us that way, and they do. They once we have that communicate the channel open, the relationship is strong between us and our leaders here in the community. So
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have that much perspective because I've never been in a different market except for Tacoma, but on that I was very insulated in the business.
No, I mean that was great. I've got one last
Lisa,
question then.
Oh, okay. Please do take your question. And then
Yeah.
Eileen, you might put Lynn on the spotlight too for when we get to the chat questions. So Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to round us out here with one. If you could just give me one kind of quick, succinct, soundbitey type answer. What do you wish that people knew about the importance of local news that maybe they don't know or they haven't articulated to themselves?
Huh. What do people need to know about local news? And why it's important? Well, I think it's kind of sad that people's consumption of information these days is at the risk of sounding like snobby. It's pretty like shallow, right? It's like Instagram reels and TikTok videos, and I don't know. Maybe I know I don't, but maybe this audience does. I'm pretty sure this audience doesn't. But I know our youth do, and I'm scared, to be honest. I think there's a certain level of kind of destruction of basic media literacy and not intelligence, but just being smart about information. And there's some rumblings going on in Congress about limiting social media usage among teens, and I think that, unfortunately, I feel like I'm a cynic. I think the lobbyists are going to get to them soon, but that would be a welcome start to fixing some of that problem. But I think it's like you spend a lot of time on doing those kind of clickbaity, algorithmically addictive things. You could spend some of that time doing stuff that's good for you. So eat your vegetables. Eat your news vegetables, kids. That'd be my advice.
Love it. Thank you, Jerry. What a
Sure.
pleasure to
Good
learn
question.
more about your publication.
Fantastic. That's going to be the new title of this video. Eat your news
Eat your
vegetables.
media vegetables? Yes. Sorry.
That's great.
Just
That's
winging
great. All right. Well, let's move to questions in the chat. Tina, our president, just put one in. I've got a few if we don't see some come up. But Tina has a question. What can individuals, communities, and the league do to support and grow local media? Lynn, you talked a little bit about what advocacy we have. You want to recap that a little?
Sure, absolutely. Is my mute off? Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. It's real important that league members, now that we do have national position on local news, take control of advocacy or take an advocacy position as well as an education position. And here in Washington State, I would like to call on my colleague, Deanne Finken, who's online here, to talk about exactly what that looks like in legislation that is working its way through our state house. Deanne, are you able to speak to that briefly?
Thank you, Lynn. Is my volume working all right? I can't tell. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'm Deanne Finken, and I've been working with Lynn and a couple of others here on the call from Washington State. A couple from the Tacoma area, Jerry.
Mhm.
And we've been pursuing a bill. We've been fortunate enough to be stakeholders with a state senator from the get-go for a bill that would feature a small levy, a surcharge on social media platforms and search engines that generate more than $5 million a year. And this is just a small 1.22% on their gross. And we're looking that it would raise $27 million, which is certainly peanuts compared to what California legislation was trying to do. But we like the bill a lot because it really does, it does not have any government control over who determines where the grant money would go. the way it's been written, it also benefits nonprofits and for-profits. It benefits large and small outlets. It's really, really smart that we are saying no, not to the general public, not to the state funds themselves, but to search engines and social media platforms that scrape the content from the original news producers, and also, steal away their advertising dollars. We don't know where it's going to go. This is the second year. We have a short legislative session in Washington. I think Oregon has a very short legislative session too. We're nearing the third to the last week in our session. There's still some hope for the Senate Bill 5400, but the times are tough. Nobody likes any talk about taxes. Again, the messaging that we're really driving home is this is revenue generating. This is not a tax on anyone except social media platforms and search engines that generate more than $5 million a year. And it's also capped at a total of $6 million. So nobody's going to be walking away with a big a hit in any way. So that's what we're working on. And also we're following legislation about media literacy and AI. So we're tracking some of that. There's a place for the league to be involved in taking the issue of local news into the legislative area. And we know that the federal government is not moving on any of this. So I think it really does behoove us to work at the state level. Lynn is a member, our representative of Rebuild Local News, which many of you are familiar with. It's a nonprofit, actually. It's spun out of Report for America. And Rebuild, we've been involved in their coalition, and we're learning about all the other states that are doing some impressive things. So there are ways for league members to be involved. We have a pretty active local news and democracy team. In fact, when we get off this call, we have our own monthly meeting. So it's a long business day for us. Yeah. So thanks. Hope that answered some questions.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good, again, boots on the ground example of what can happen. I want to be sure we get to as many questions as possible. And we have an interesting one in the chat about fact checking. So, are there people in local media, and specifically maybe, Jerry, you can speak to that if you know the details for the Day Journal, who do that? How do we know that the information we're getting is true?
Yes. Back in the old days, there would be whole departments of fact checkers who would go through each journalist's story and just call, verify, all that. Obviously, that's not feasible in today's economic times for newspapers. For us, the editor or the copy editor will review the story. If there's something that seems questionable, at least of the stuff we write, then they'll consult with the reporter, they'll check their notes and reconnect with their sources if necessary. In our paper, we also do wire story, Associated Press, and Reuters, and Bay City News. Those are three wire services that we pay for content. On those, we do not have the wherewithal to check. We rely on the services to do their own fact checking on those. And so oftentimes people will write us saying that story about Trump or that story about Gaza, those facts are incorrect. It is not in our expertise or ability to fact check that. We have to rely on those we pay money to give us content for. So I don't mean to sound like we just pass the buck on. It's just not possible for us to do.
There's also been
national, international stories.
I have just one comment on that. I understand what you're saying. You're absolutely right. One of the resources that we can offer all league members right now is our media literacy workshops. And in those workshops, we have 2 professional instructors, one of whom is online now with us, I believe, Professor. And what we do is teach people how to be media literate. And part of that is how to engage your critical thinking skills. And that will go a long way to answering that question for each individual reader. It's not a panacea. There's no one thing. There's lots of different skills that you have to constantly use and practice using.
believe a
if
lot
that
of
if
high
that helps.
schools are adding that to their curriculum as well. I mean, I can
Correct.
imagine a piece of the state legislature there that would require media literacy in terms of high school curriculum.
Mhm.
Lisa, do you have any insight into that question? It seems to be kind of the existential question of the moment. What can we believe?
Yeah, I mean, information coming from news organizations, like journalists have a process much like the scientific method for verifying information. We just haven't really told anybody that we've been doing it this whole time.
Mhm.
So, once you do the work to understand that a news organization is in fact like credible and ethical and reliable, there's a lot of work on the back end that's happening there. There's also been a rise in sort of like third party solutions to help with that. So there are, for example, verifying the provenance of social video, right? Like there are organizations tailored to help news organizations be like, okay, is this AI, or did this thing come from where it's supposed to come from, so that when news organizations are reporting on that sort of thing, they can feel they know that it's real. So there's like a lot of things like that, political statements, all those sorts of things. There's support in that area. But for local news, really, like Jerry's saying it's somebody in the newsroom who's like, let me check that out. Let me make sure that checks out. Because there's not always a million ways to verify that. And so it's just that's why you need those eyes on the street and those boots on the ground.
Another question, what constitutes, we hear the term independent media, independent journalism. What constitutes independence there? We have papers that have become privately owned that seem biased by the owner, but others tout privately owned papers or media to be independent of something or other. So can you comment on that? Is independent media a good thing? And what's it mean to be independent?
That's a great
I
question.
can, yeah.
N equals one, just me. We're independent and we're not owned by a national corporation publicly held by stockholders. And it's impossible to be unbiased about anything, right? But I'm the owner of this paper. My personal views and political desires do not affect in any way, shape, or form the coverage we provide. So this newspaper is independent of my views. So and then we try to follow the basic tenets of old school journalism, which is get sources, try to get both sides when possible. Hopefully they return the calls or their emails, and try to report facts as it is possible, as much as it is possible. So that'd be me. I don't know about, I think you guys could talk more about industry-wide what independent means.
Yeah, I mean, so I used to work for a membership organization of independent news organizations, and our definition of independent, like people would apply for membership, and then we'd like look and be like, are they really independent? Are they really all the things they say they are? And so I can't remember, I don't have the exact definition in the front of my head, but it's basically like you're not owned by a conglomerate or a corporation, or, if you're, have an affiliation with a university or something like that. It's basically like, can you, the organization, make choices that are independent of any broader thing? And so obviously, like Jerry's publication completely fits that bill. He's not beholden to any other entity to make organizational decisions. And so when you are beholden to another entity, you may make decisions that maybe aren't quite in the best interests of the community. I'll give you a random example. So I used to live in Eugene, Oregon, and the newspaper there was family owned forever, and then it was bought. It was bought by a corporation, and one of the things they were doing is saying, "Okay, we've got these big stories. We're going to run them everywhere." And there was a story about midwives and like the dangers of birth by midwife. And that's like, I'm sure that was a very well reported story, but that did not go over well in Eugene, Oregon, where we are like all about the midwives, right? So it's not that it wasn't like a valid story. It's just you'd want to kind of like take a different approach to that for the community that for that community. And so everybody was like up in arms about that story. And it didn't tell the story that like took into account all of the little pieces of the community itself. So that's a piece of content that I'm telling that story through. But yeah, basically, like, can you make decisions on your own?
And how do you explain it? Clearly, we have the Washington Post as one example, and the LA paper, I think, is privately. So Jerry's made a decision to step back and be old-fashioned. But clearly, papers owned by a single individual can and do take on their own journalistic biases. Are they independent because they're owned by one rich person?
I mean, technically, right? But I think that it's making decisions free of some entity, right? And if you're making decisions based on a political entity, and trying to kind of like be in the good graces of a political entity, then okay, you're independent in name, but are you independent in your sort of approach? And that's where it just gets so messy. Because Jerry's right. No one can be totally unbiased. Like we all have our worldview, our lens, our objectives. But I think the important thing here is like trying to always keep that big picture in mind, and trying to sort of make decisions that are like for your community, for your readers, for your people. And if you are not able or willing to do that, then your independence is called into question.
One of the things that you might consider is when you're looking at a publication, try to find out, number one, follow the money. And then number two, ask yourself, because you're the reader, is this paper abiding by the Society for Professional Journalist ethics, ethical standards? And that is something anybody can read. It's very available and will help you as a reader decide, gosh, is this an outlet that seems to be guided by the money or by the owners or by a particular point of view? This one resource, again, Society for Professional Journalists, it is in our study. If you want to read that, you can go there. It's just about anywhere you can Google it. Maybe that can help provide some guidance there. Because again, you've got to remember that so many of the traditional media has been purchased by hedge funds. Follow the money. Their purpose is to make money. And if that's their purpose, then you really need to understand what their motivation is. And then some hedge funds, I'm going to guess there might be one or two out there that might have newspapers that actually do provide legitimate journalism, again, guided by the Society for Professional Journalism Ethics.
I would like to jump in here and say, as league members, you really have a lot of power in this area of local news. We're supporting a piece of legislation before the Senate, no, before the House in Washington State. It's about AI, and this bill would require any AI-generated materials include a disclaimer of sorts saying that it's AI generated and a tool to be able to identify where how it's generated with AI. That's something that league members can do. And I make this point because it wasn't until 3 years ago on our state board that we had a portfolio of local news and democracy, just like you'll have civics ed portfolio or voter services, but we have a portfolio, and that's a person who is involved in all this. I also serve on the lobby team that we have that portfolio. And really more and more we realize how tied local news, access to local news is to the very foundation of what the league is all about empowering voters and defending democracy. So, I would think, more and more locals could develop those committees, those portfolios to hold. The last thing I wanted to say also about verification and all, the major piece of legislation that we are promoting and supporting does have a provision in there that anybody eligible for grant money that might be raised by this surcharge on social media platforms and search engines, any entity has to have a system for correcting errors and reporting errors in public. So look for that. See if your local outlet does have a system for saying, whoa, we screwed up and this is a correct information. If they're correcting it, more power to them. Everybody makes mistakes. And think about any news story that's out there. How many gazillions of facts that can go wrong? You know, anybody from spelling of a name to transposing numbers. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. Thanks. I appreciate that. We have one. I'm going to take one last question. I thought it was particularly interesting, and then we're going to move off to Tina to say goodbye. And thank you. What a splendid presentation we've had. We have a question in the chat from Elizabeth. What are local news organizations, especially print-based, doing to attract younger audiences? And is there a challenge there?
Well, we are not doing a good job of that. It's a Herculean task, to be honest. It's that famous author wrote, "The medium is the message." They've been trained for the quick hit. Just like we live in a society now, anything's on demand. You want to watch a movie, Netflix did it on demand, pay 99 cents and get this. Like the way we all grew up, it's way different. We had to wait for the show to come on and whatnot. So it's a huge challenge for us. So I think some of that would be addressed. We could use the tools of our enemy. Like, so I could try to find a high school intern or a college age student to do TikToks and things. I'm still debating whether to try that and just at least do like updates and talk about how important it is to be literate in information consumption. I don't know if that's tilting at windmills or what, but it's something I'm thinking about. Maybe get my own kids to do it. I don't know. It's I wish there was a way that there was an easy answer for that. But I guess one way is just try to even train their young parents, like parents in their 20s and 30s. They're getting harder to reach as well. So we really need to try to focus on having the right content that draws them. That's important, but also just figure out more exciting media to make the message more desirable for them. I think that's what
APJ does trains young journalists. Do you guys have a secret sauce there?
Oh, sorry. Are you talking to me? Yeah. I mean, Jerry gets at there's a fundamental challenge, right? Like young audiences, they want to discover news on the social platforms where they already are, but the social platforms are engineered to keep them there, right? So what we as news organizations want to do is be like, discover us here and then come over here to our owned and operated channels. And then like we'll develop a relationship and maybe you become a member or a subscriber, whatever. But like social media is real good about not allowing that transfer to happen. So we are seeing a lot of folks doing experimenting with social video, which is basically TikTok and Reels and things like that. And they're coming up with some really interesting, like, do this kind of video, not that kind of video, produce it this way. It needs to look like professionally produced, but casually made. So there's like, we're learning a lot of kind of like cool tricks for our lane. But the challenge is getting them out of TikTok and onto our, website or our newsletter or whatever. So it's a real work in progress.
And again, where the League of Women Voters can have help with that is in media literacy, advocating for that to happen at the elementary school level, because the League is traditionally involved with education at all levels. So think about how your League could advocate for media literacy to teach those kids in elementary school about effective journalism using social media.
All three of you, this has just been tremendous. I'm going to hand off the official thank yous to Tina. I'm going to share my screen again. See if I can find where we were. Get it back to here,
So
Are we there?
okay. Just want to say thank you to our speakers, and really a big thank you to our programs committee who put this program together. Um, this is, I think we do excellent programs, and I'm so glad so many of you could come and join us here today. If you liked what you saw here, consider coming to some of these upcoming events. We have our County League Day, which is on March 7th. This is an in-person event at the San Mateo Library. Um, the teaser for this is we're going to be talking about the local study we've been doing. And there's some pretty interesting findings we've seen on campaign finance reporting. So we're going to discuss those findings and then discuss what we want to do about them as a league. It's part of a broader effort we have on local government accountability and transparency. Then we also have a committee that's working on the Electoral College. We call that One Person, One Vote, which we don't actually have considering how the Electoral College works, but that's our aspiration. If you're interested in that, consider joining the conversation on March 9th. It's a Zoom meeting, so you can do it in your fuzzy slippers. We also have an observer corps that will be meeting at the end of March. We meet every other month. That gives people some time to actually observe our government. And we're comparing notes and learning. At the moment, we're learning a little bit about how our city governments work and our public meetings work, but we are going to eventually move into some consolidated information and action on that. And then we have another great general meeting coming up in April on the budget bill, beautiful, bad, or otherwise. So this is the big, beautiful bill that was passed last summer, and we'll be looking at some of the local impacts of that. And then if you're interested, you've liked everything you've heard so far, you want to get more involved, consider joining us. You can do that right now. You don't need to wait. But if you want to learn a little bit more, consider coming to our new member orientation, which will be at the end of April. So you can find out all these things on our website. We have the long, awkward name of LWVNCSMC, but if you just Google League of Women Voters San Mateo County, you'll find us. And just the next, I think we have one more slide. And then if you're interested in getting involved, we do work to educate voters and also make sure voters have access. So we have opportunities for tabling. We're going to be doing Donuts for Democracy at Saramonte Mall next Sunday. So you can find me and others there. And then we have a number of things that we do, like the programs committee. So if you kind of would like to be part of something, consider that. And we also have our observer corps, and we're doing the Electoral College, which I mentioned before. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to the speakers and to the programs committee for putting this together. It was fabulous. And thank you for everybody here for attending. This was just super informative, and I think everybody's going to appreciate being able to see the recording and learn more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Here, thanks, Tina.